This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
PTB Wrestling Network. We are here for you in our honor. Welcome to the premiere episode of a labor of love that I am Scott Criscuolo, have looked forward to wanting to do pretty much since our network began way back in, well, I guess you could say when the first Place to Be podcast dropped back in 2011, or when we first started doing other shows in 2014. But finally, we are here to do it. The first ever podcast solely dedicated to the legacy of that kind of, not forgotten, but that kind of lost cousin of ECW. And that is, of course, Ring of Honor. And this is the Pod of Honor. Yes, I've always wanted to do a show called Pod of Honor. And finally, I have it. Well, we have it. Because I like to bring my co-host in because I couldn't do this show without this guy. Like, there's a ton of people in our PTB Wrestling Network family that I love doing shows with. But this specific one could only be with this guy. Because there's not many people that have a tuned-in knowledge of the now 20-year plus history of this promotion, for better or for worse, than one of my good special friends, Steve Aloysius Wille.
Hello. Yeah, I am pretty darn excited about this.
Right.
It's something we've had on our mind for quite a few years at this point. So pretty much. It is. I thought about honorable discharge or dishonorable discharge, but that probably would be pretty gross, I think.
I know a lot of people in the PTB family that are honorable discharge. So.
Yeah, I know some that are dishonorable.
There are more than a dishonorable. Yes, that are dishonorable discharge. Anyway, so here's the thing. The reason that we finally got around to doing it is a couple reasons. Number one, you know, I've been able to carve out at least one extra night because, as everyone knows, of course, Steve is with me every other week, along with the Sheriff Pete Schermacher and the Godfather Nate Milton on Police Be Nation's main event. But Steve is a busy man and has lots of things. But finally, he was able to carve out an extra day. So this is going to be monthly. This is the February episode. We're going to do this monthly, and for now, maybe we'll switch it to bi-monthly, depending on how, you know, plans and schedules and such. But for now, we'll do a monthly. And I put the content in Steve's trusting hands. We're not going to go chronologically. We're not going to do, all right, let's start with the Era of Honor begins. Then we'll do this show in 2002. Then we'll do this show. We're not doing that. Tell us how Steve, tell us how the month to month will go, and tell us kind of what you have in your head in terms of what you'd like to present to our listeners here on our show.
Yeah, my original thoughts were, well, first of all, there's so many Ring of Honor shows at this point because You have the regular monthly events or every couple week events that have been going on since 2003. All the television between HDNet and Sinclair that they've done over the years. They've had TV tapings. They've had regular shows that have doubled as TV tapings. They've had regular pay-per-views. There's just so many different shows. And on one of our sister networks, the PWO network, we've had relationships with for many, many years. They already have a podcast called Through the Years, ROH, the years, that has started at the very beginning. And I think they're like 100-something shows in at this point. Wow. And they do a great job. They do a really great job. It's Trevor Dame and, God, if they're listening to this, I'm sorry. It's Matt Feuerstein, I think the last name is. I'm just not on Twitter, so I'm terrible at that stuff. And they just do a fantastic job. So I'm like, okay, that's already been done. So why do it? And so I have always, like, from the time that we did Mission Indie Possible back in the day, I like taking little
Oh my God.
clumps.
There's
Yeah,
a
like,
there's a there's a show in the vault, Mission
yeah,
Indie Possible.
it's a great show that is so much fun. And because we're able to, like, if you're watching a bunch of pay-per-view shows, it's not that it's tiresome, it's a big time commitment.
Right.
And I think it's kind of fun to look at little, like, smaller topics. So, like, for Indie Possible, we found all the Bryan Danielson matches in Chikara. And so there was like 4 or so, or 4 or 5. Well, that's a little bit easier to digest, and then you can kind of put a story together into a podcast instead of just, okay, BJ Whitmer against this guy. I don't know why I said BJ Whitmer, but we're on a Ring of Honor podcast, so there we go.
That was rando. I know, right?
Yeah, so that
Silas
was kind of thought. And we've already had a few ideas before we even started. I know this is going to be an evergreen podcast, but we're taping right after the passing of Jay Briscoe.
Yes.
Rest in peace.
Yes.
It's horribly sad story, and
terrible. So, with every detail that's been coming out, it's worse and worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, prayers up to them, especially the kids. Yeah. So that we're gonna do. Since that happened, we'll do like a Jay Briscoe episode, and pretty much what we'll do is like take a couple matches. We'll each pick a couple matches, and we'll have guests as well on the show, and put together little themes. So the one that I thought, since we're just kind of going to intro like our history with Ring of Honor and stuff like that, like, what's a good intro? And so I looked at, like, I thought of the best matches from 03 or 02, 03, 04, the first 3 years of Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I chose them not just by Meltzer ratings, because especially in the early years, Meltzer didn't watch a lot of the Ring of Honor, just because, I mean, it took a long time to get. It was mostly a VHS. It was like a mail-in type thing or call-in, because RF Video, who did all the ECW fan cams, and you could still buy to this day, by the way. After ECW closed, they wanted a way to make income, so that's pretty much where Ring of Honor came from. The tickets were secondary. They wanted to sell all the VHS tapes and later DVDs, but especially in the first couple of years, it took a long time to get to get the tapes or the DVDs. So Meltzer didn't watch a lot of the stuff right away because it took months. And then by the time they came out, Meltzer puts out weekly stuff, so he's not going to be like, in October, here's a match that happened in April.
Right.
So there's just not many ratings for the early stuff unless they're like top of the line. But Cage Match I always refer to that when we're doing the main event, because, and even when I'm doing my own watching, just because it's an easy way to find events, or if I'm watching old wrestling, I can like look up the card. And they always have the ratings that you can put in too. And so for bigger events, bigger matches, it's a pretty fair rating that fans give, I think, especially the more people you have voting. So I picked the 3 matches from each year that had the highest audience rating through Cage Match. And I think 2 of the 3 lined up perfectly with Meltzer's rating as well. And I think one Meltzer didn't even see. So that's kind of where I chose the matches from today. And, maybe in the future we can go through the other years as well.
Oh, no, I think it's a great idea. And we'll do a lot of theme stuff. Like I think we've already decided that, obviously, for our episode in March, even though it would have been almost a month it would have been a month and a half since he passed, but we will do a legacy episode on the Briscoes, not just as a tag team, but singles. I think I may have been at Jay Briscoe's greatest moment as a singles wrestler, and that was in April of 2013 at, I think, what was the inaugural Supercard of Honor in 2013, when he defeated Kevin Steen, we all know who that is, to become the ROH World Champion. And Give Me Back My Bullets by Skinner was blasting at Hammerstein, which is pretty awesome. Then he had the personalized belt, which I thought was always pretty cool. We hope from time to time here on the show to have one of our dearest friends. He's a very busy guy. That is, of course, the former voice of Ring of Honor, Mr. Kevin Kelly. We hope to have him on from time to time if he's available to talk certain topics. He was there for a good long while. In fact, he was there during pretty hot time for for ROH. So, and I think he would be, and I've already kind of alluded it to him already, and he'd be honored to come on. We just got to work schedules out whenever he's, of course, in Japan. Of course, he is the North American voice of New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I thought he did a great job at Wrestle Kingdom. On a side note, Steve, we both watched it for main event. I thought he did a pretty good job. I always think Kevin does a great job. He's a good play-by-play guy. He's clean, crisp. Lets the color guy be the goofball. I've always enjoyed Kevin as a commentator. So, and he was who was his what was it? Nigel? Was it Nigel?
Well, Nigel pretty early on. They're just a great team. Nigel's one of my favorite wrestlers ever.
Right.
And then he did. Who else did he do with?
Well, didn't he have
Carino for a while? Yeah.
Well, didn't he have Carino when Scum was the thing?
Yeah.
Right.
And then Nigel. No, Vedic Scott did a couple episodes, a little bit, and then they kind of moved over to Ian Riccaboni when Kevin left to do New Japan.
Yeah, that was what, 2015?
Gosh, I'm 16 maybe.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Kevin. I think it's 2015 or 2016. Anyway, so tonight, as for our inaugural episode, Steve has decided to we've decided to pick out 3 matches, one from each of the first 3 years of the promotion, that may have indicated what was to come from what Ring of Honor is. Because I think a lot of people, when it debuted. Now let's look at before we dive in, Steve. Let's talk about the wrestling landscape at this time. Early 2002, ROH was WCW was dead. ECW was dead. The invasion killed them even more. So by the end of 01 and the beginning of 02, WWE was the only game in town. Now 02 WWE had a good year. Well, they were the WWF until May, and then they were WWE. But WWE, for the most part, was not a bad year in 2002. They had a solid year. They had good matches. Hogan came back. That was fun for nostalgia. Shawn came back. You know, we had some good stuff with him and Triple H. SummerSlam was a killer show. Brock won the title, started his ascent. It was 03 when WWE started to kind of go, well, half of WWE. SmackDown was awesome. Raw, except for Evolution, Raw was kind of unwatchable dreck. But Raw was the super. I even said this too, Steve, on past shows, the Place Me podcast, when JR and I did, the 03 shows. Raw was the superstar entertainment brand. SmackDown was the wrestling brand.
Yep.
Pretty much. If you wanted to just be entertained by personalities with average matches, you have Raw. If you wanted, good promos, but not great promos, but 5-star, 3 3/4 to 4.5 average star matches every week, you watch SmackDown. So there was a landscape for maybe some new promotions. And in 2002, not 1, 2 promotions launched in 2002. And to this day, they're both still standing. Well, one was on life support and was resurrected by Mr. Anthony Aloysius Khan. The other somehow is still breathing. We, to this day, Steve, still don't know how Impact Wrestling still has a pulse. But they do, and they're still fun to watch. We are going to go back, everyone, over on Main Event. We are going to go back to the classic TNA pay-per-view recaps because Steve loves them, and we're gonna force Pete to do it. I know he gets squirmy, but who cares? Come on, Pete, we'll have some fun.
I thought about that today too because I was looking through social media and Impact they do like the best of Impact and put little like 3 to 5 minute videos on, just like most places do, and they were like, this probably was 04 maybe. I'm just guessing by the ring and the time period, but it was Eric Watts versus Don Callis for control of TNA. I'm like, what even is this? Like,
what the hell? That should be on Dave's and my Through the Looking Glass, because that's a universe I wish to never go into.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that was real. Oh, good Lord. All right. So in February of 2002, we began Ring of Honor. And then a few months later in May was the first at the time, NWA/TNA show. And of course, if you'd like to, we have a bunch of great shows on all four on the Quadapods. There's, of course, Highway to the Impact Zone. There's TNA Never Dies over on NoSo. And of course, you, me, and Nate did some recaps on Main Event from time to time, and we're going to bring those back. Right now, I think we're in like February of 2003 or something.
I mean, ours are the best. Let's just be honest. Like, no offense to everybody. Ours are the best.
Hey, of course. It always is. It's always the best. All right. So why don't you paint the picture for us, Steve? What is our first match tonight?
Well, the first match is the main event of the very first show, Era of Honor Begins. And it is the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, not ever really called Bryan Danielson, just the Dragon, versus Loki versus the Fallen Angel, Christopher Daniels.
Yes, he was actually introduced as the American Dragon. They didn't say Bryan Danielson. Yeah.
All three still active. I mean, Loki to much lesser extent, but Danielson wrestling every week in AEW, and Daniels will pop up from time to time in AEW, basically as an agent backstage. But he also has been doing a lot of indies lately, like on the West Coast and in the Midwest. So,
yep.
I think 20 years ago, still active.
That's crazy. So to set the table, here was the rest of the card. So again, as Steve mentioned, it was called The Era of Honor Begins, and it took place on February 23rd, 2002, from the Murphy Recreational Center in Philadelphia. That's why a lot of people thought this was just going to be a cleaner ECW, and it really isn't. It really never was that, which is good. The first match in the history of ECW. Here I go, you say ECW. The first match in the history of Ring of Honor, Mafia and Monster Mac defeated Bully and Mace with Alice in Danger in his corner when Mafia pinned Mace after a burning hammer at 112.
Notoriously awful, horribly homophobic and misogynistic angle to start off, which they were known for. Like, I don't think it's been on. Even in the previous incarnation of Honor Club, I don't think they ever had it on. It's definitely not on now, but it is one of the worst segments of all time. So there was a lot of that in that first year or so of just stuff that didn't even stand up in 2002, to be honest.
Right.
Horribly uncomfortable, but still some of that remnants of AEW type, not AEW, ECW. Now I'm doing it. ECW stuff, like the not so great stuff. But eventually they cleaned that up.
And what's funny is WWE was probably the cleanest because, I mean, what do they have in 2002? Hot lesbians. Whereas, because as we documented, Steve, Impact TNA was not the most innocent either.
No.
In that as well. So, fitting that we're about to say this. The second match in ROH history involved Jay Briscoe, and I feel that's fitting. He did lose. It was a singles match. He lost to Amazing Red, one of your favorites, with the Red Star Press at 8:30. I'm sure that was a great match.
And generally it's thought of as, usually stated as the first Ring of Honor match, because the first one was more of an angle than anything.
Right.
So that's.
Let's give Jay Briscoe the credit for the first.
Yeah,
match.
Absolutely. Historically, that's known as the first match.
Yeah. Okay. Xavier, rest in peace, pinned Scoot Andrews with the X-Breaker at 10:06. Danny Drake and Mike Tobin defeated Homicide. Homicide, who's still putzing around. Homicide was most recently the NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah.
And his tag team partner Boogaloo via disqualification when Homicide attacked Tobin with a rubber chicken.
Oh god, yeah, it was a weird weird tag team. They were supposed to be like, straight from the insane asylum. They had their orange jumpsuits on. I don't understand the rubber chicken thing. It lasted for a few shows.
Oh my god. Quiet Storm defeated Amazing Red, Jose Maximo, Joel Maximo. Jesus, what is this? This is our TNA segment. Brian XL, Chris Devine in an elimination match by eliminating Joel Maximo at 15:56. Jose accidentally pinned Amazing Red at 10:05. Divine defeated Brian XL at 10:28. Storm Maximo at 11:36, and Maximo eliminated Divine with the Storm Cradle Driver at 11:36. Mikey Whipwreck was the special referee, so they did try to kind of jack up the Philly crowd with one of their favorite sons.
Yeah. And some of those were his. I think a lot of those were his students as well.
Right. Yeah. Prince Nana, one of my favorites. I love Prince Nana. Pinned Eric Tuttle with a double underhook brainbuster at the 53-second mark. Spanky and Ayakea Loa defeated Oz and not that Oz and Michael Shane when Spanky pinned Oz with the sliced bread number 2 at 12:29. As a result, Spanky won a Ring of Honor contract. Super Crazy pinned Eddie Guerrero with a small package at 10:42. The bout was held to determine the IWAIC championships. So, of course, as you know, Eddie was bounced because I'm watching one of my chrono watches now. I would say like mid to late May of 2001, maybe even early June.
Yeah.
He was gone. He had, of course, his personal demons. He would come back after WrestleMania and feud with RVD. They had a series of amazing Intercontinental title matches. Of course, there was that ladder match on Raw where the guy ran in the ring and Eddie beat the shit out of him. But Eddie was trying to get his feet wet, so here he is, Steve, in the inaugural show of Ring of Honor, the late great Eddie Guerrero. Isn't that amazing?
I feel like he had 3 matches. Like he was on maybe the first 3. I think the first 3 shows.
Well, let's see. The next show, we'll look real quick, was a month later, the Round Robin Challenge on March 30th. Let me see if he's on this show. Spanky Maximo, Danielson, low key. No. I bet you he was here April 27th of 2002. Yeah, here he is.
Yeah.
Oh, he actually came back. Wow.
Yeah, because he was already advertised. I remember this now. He was already advertised, and so WWE let him.
Yes, Night of Appreciation on April 27th. He had already beaten RVD for the Intercontinental title.
Right.
He and Amazing Red beat the Maximos in the main event. And then you're thinking maybe the next show?
No, I was thinking the first 3 show. That was his last one. That one right there.
Okay, so it's the first 2. Okay.
Yeah.
So that brings us to our main event. As Steve mentioned, Low Key, Christopher Daniels, and the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. Not the first time I've watched the match. I thought it was an awesome match, obviously. What I liked also, Steve, and I'm going to tell you this now, all 3 matches that we're going to talk about tonight, all were very different for me.
Yeah.
Very different. This one was, I don't want to say it was a spot fest, but it was just a great opportunity to showcase. It was kind of a billboard, I think, of what the promotion would become over time. And you had 3 different kinds of workers. You had Low Key, who was a striker. Tell me if I'm wrong. You had Low Key, who was a striker. You had Danielson, who was a grinder. And you had Daniels, who was kind of like the, how do I word it? The kind of the experienced big time guy, like kind of worked a little differently, a little more deliberate, almost like a WWE or WCW type of wrestler. Took his time, kind of psychology driven in his approach to the match. And I feel like there was one spot where Danielson is just on his hands and knees and Low-Key just keeps kicking him in the fucking head. Probably not as far as but yeah. Then there was another like kind of crippler move where Daniels had Low-Key and like, it was almost like a Walls of Jericho. And he had his knee in the back of his neck.
Yeah, like the Lion Tamer, only like even harder.
Yeah, that was a great move. I just love the match because I was enjoying watching 3 different kinds of guys work together. And I thought a great pick here, Steve. And I feel like this was a match that was the poster child for what would become at least the first like 5 to 6 years of Ring of Honor wrestling.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like what you said about it, like with the 3 being different wrestlers, and that had to have been on purpose that they chose that. Like Daniel's more of a character, like he was part of he started the prophecy, and he didn't believe in the Ring of Honor rules of, shaking hands and no interference. The irony of that is he was probably the least dirty person in the match, because like Dragon and Loki kept double teaming him. And so they were like, even though Daniels is supposed to be the heel, and post match, which wasn't on the video, I don't believe, or it was in the video, I just didn't watch it. Like Daniels starts the I'm not shaking hands, but during the match itself, like all three were fighting as faces. And the one thing I really liked about it, and I think I've watched this probably 3 times now, and I didn't notice it the first 2 times. Your usual triple threats, it's the trope of 2 guys in the ring, one guy rolls out, 2 guys in the ring, the other guy. It just keeps going back and forth like that, except for the very beginning and the very end when the finish. I don't think anyone ever left the ring of the 3 people during this 20-plus minute match. They stayed in the ring at all times, which, Ring of Honor always has had. The same with ECW. They've had your spot fest. They've been known for it. A lot of people like flying out of the ring. In America, they're one of the, big places that started that. So it was, and Daniels, neither are big flyers. They did mention that Dragon, started as a flyer but changed his style pretty quickly. But still, like the fact that they didn't roll out of the ring, like next time there's a triple threat on, just watch. It's going to be one-on-one the whole time. I thought that was really fun, and it added a bit to the match, because then there were more like triple team type moves where it was really funny when Daniels was in like some sort of deathlock that Danielson had him in on, and then Loki kept, giving those just disgustingly hard kicks. And Danielson would fall back, thereby putting the deathlock on harder. And then he would sit back up. And it would just keep going back and forth. And eventually Danielson suplexed Loki while he still had Daniels in the lock. And they wanted to, also with Danielson, put over the cattle mutilation. The announcers was Carino and someone else. The first year, they had so many different announcers going in and out. It was funny. I was like, "Oh, this is a very popular submission, the cattle mutilation on the West Coast." I was like, "Wait, what? what are you talking about?" Yeah, I think it did. It set the standard for what they were looking for. Yeah, they had some really disgusting, gross stuff in the beginning of the show, but this was the standard of wrestling that they were really looking for. It's putting on. 1 or 2 great matches, have some feuds along the way, and it was a good start, and I think it shows you something, that the first main event of the first show ended up being their match of the year.
Yeah, and again, I think they did a great job of picking these guys because they were already names. What was Danielson doing? What were all 3 of them? Well, Daniels was kind of putzing around. He was, I know he did.
Danielson's around for like 10 years at this point.
Yeah, Daniel. Well, remember, you know that really weird urban legend Dave Hall and I talked about it on Through the Looking Glass. Remember, Daniels was going to be the higher power.
Yeah, there was that rumor
supposedly, and that was what, June of '99, and everyone was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" But yeah, he's been wrestling since like '93, probably at this point,
somewhere around there. Because he's from Michigan, or at least he lived in Michigan, and then he worked in this Chicago indie called Windy City Wrestling. I think Punk wrestled there too. And I remember in the Midwest seeing him. The first ECW show I went to, he was like 98. He wrestled against like El Masco de la Merced or something like that. And then I saw him do dark matches in Milwaukee and Chicago for WWE. And then he was going around doing those kind of indies and was on the East Coast. I know that Sapolsky. There's all this information that was in the back of my head that's all coming back to me now. Took a lot of guys from this ECWA. They used to have like a tournament every year out east. So he saw a lot of the guys there that he brought on. Dragon wrestled out of Texas. He was training under Shawn Michaels, part of his school. Like Shawn only partially trained him. Spanky was there too. Paul London was there too, and some of like Rudy Boy Gonzalez's guys that are on later in the year. There's a really good match that Chad Campbell sent me once of Dragon and Spanky from like 2000, like right when they started. Because I think, didn't they say that Dragon was only like 20 years old or 22 or something like that in this?
Didn't he wrestle? Yeah, he did. Didn't he wrestle? We'll have to look it up. It's probably on History WWE. I'm sure Graham and Landy have it. Did he wrestle on that Pillman show? Maybe in 2000. Maybe it's not the Pillman show. Maybe it's the no. I'm sorry, not the Pillman show. The
Funk show.
The show that Sean did. It was like the one match he wrestled between WrestleMania 14 and SummerSlam 02. He wrestled Cade. Wasn't he on that show?
Lance Cade, probably. Yeah, probably, because those
he
were
might have
all
been on that show.
"quote unquote" Sean guys, and then
yeah,
that's where he meant kind of Regal too. Was way back then.
Yeah. Well, Regal wrestled. Was it Benoit? That's where I got the Pillman card from. He might have been on that.
Yeah, wrestled Benoit.
It's on Benoit's. The Forbidden DVD, the Forbidden Door DVD.
Yes. God, I sold that for quite a bit. I was cleaning out a closet, and I'm like, I don't want this in my house, really.
I know. I'm a sick fuck. I still have it. I would never. I don't know if I could put it in, but I still have it somewhere.
Yeah, I thought like $50 is a pretty good deal somewhere around there.
I'll have to look it up. I got to look it up and see. Yeah, I got to look it up and see. What people have it up for on eBay. I think it'd be pretty funny. Anyway, we digress. Yeah. I thought this was a fantastic main event. I would consider it like a 2002 match of the year candidate.
Yeah.
I don't know what, I don't know. Dave, I was watching a clip. I think Cultaholic did it. Cultaholic Wrestling on their YouTube channel did a video on kind of the history and the breakdown of Dave's 5-star matches. Mm-hmm. ROH's first 5-star match wasn't till 2006.
Well, I think he went back and retroactively gave Joe versus Punk the match. Spoiler, we're going to do for 2004. I think he went back and gave that one 5 stars.
Let me take a look. There's a list on Wikipedia. Let me see. List of Dave Meltzer.
Because for the most part, and this is from that Through the Years show, I remember that he would put Ring of Honor results in the newsletter, but he would get the reports from readers, and sometimes like Mike Johnson. Who did Mike Johnson work for? Is he like PW Insider? Is he
PW Insider? Yeah, Mike Johnson's with Scherer and Buck Woodward and all those guys on Insider. Yeah.
God, is Dave Scherer still around?
Yes.
Oh God,
he's a fuck stick though, because like he barely watches shit, and he's a mess. Buck Woodward and all those other guys do all the work over there. So
yeah, I know Mike Johnson does a lot. It's just not something that I read. But God, he's been around since the 90s. Because it was like him and Bob Ryder.
Yeah. Oh God. Grumpy bastard. Yes, you are right. I'm looking at Dave's list. So retroactively, the first official match, ROH match, Dave gave 5 stars was WrestleMania weekend in Detroit. Supercard of Honor. So there was Supercard of Honor before the one I was talking about. They just titled, I don't know. It would look weird on History WWE. CIMA, Masato Yoshino, and Naruki Doi versus Dragon Kid, Genki Horiguchi, and Ryo Saito. But then retroactively, he gave one of the matches we're talking about tonight 5 stars. You're right.
Yeah. And Kobashi Joe, which I'm sure we'll do at some point too. I have mixed emotions about Gabe Sapolsky. I've said some of it on the main event over the years. He has always been great at. I don't think he hasn't trained talent or brought up talent. He never really done that, but he found talent, and he found good talent that were not showcased and gave them a platform to do it, and then build good stories with them. And that match you mentioned, that he brought guys from Dragon Gate over in Japan. And that opened my eyes up to that style of really fast-paced wrestling, and I'm still a fan of that today. And he started Dragon Gate USA after he left Ring of Honor. But yeah, he started bringing those guys into a couple shows a year, and especially over Mania weekend, and that they were just things that we had not seen in the U.S. except maybe like Kai and Tai when they started and when they had the one match in the first ECW pay-per-view. But besides that, it was just something we never saw.
Right. Incidentally, on a side note, maybe this is matches we'll have to talk about down the line. People want to make fun of Michael Elgin. He is in a 5-star match.
Oh yeah, he had that hot streak of a couple years.
He is March 31st, so this is Mania. I think this is Mania weekend in Miami. Showdown in the Sun.
I think so.
Him and Davey Richards, March 31st, 2012. And then the next one, Dave didn't give until, this is batshit. The next one was not till, holy crap. That's
this year?
Back in April. The Super Card of Honor match with, of course, Jay and Mark and FTR. So he didn't do it. I mean, that's a little fucked up. I mean, really, there wasn't a 5-star ROH match in 10 years.
Well, that's
really?
What I think, I think he watched the major pay-per-views because there's a lot of 4.5 I'm looking at. But there are a lot of holes in here that he doesn't have. Because I say the heyday of Ring of Honor, the early years were 04 to 07, maybe going into 08. Kind of like when Nigel, and then when Tyler Black, Seth Rollins started, and then kind of when the Bullet Club stuff happened, 2014 to 2018, when you had the Bucks and AJ and Kyle O'Reilly and Eddie Edwards and then Cody and Omega and stuff like that kind of was at the end. And then once they left, the Madison Square Garden show, that was kind of all downhill from there.
Right. So there you go. That's our first match tonight. Definitely watch it if you have not. It is on it's on YouTube, I think, and it's also on the ROH. It's on the ROH app. The watchroh.com, and it's, if you have, I'm pretty sure it's on Roku. It's definitely on Amazon Fire TV.
Yeah, it's on Roku. It plays pretty well. It's much better than it used to be. Still has room for improvement. But I think it went pretty good.
I think so too. That one I watched on YouTube. For some reason it wasn't pulling up. This next match I watched on the ROH app, and it was pretty great. Tell us what match number 2 is tonight, Steve.
Match number 2 I have never seen before until this podcast. Night of Grudges, 2003, and it is AJ Styles versus Paul London. AJ, it's kind of cool that we did this match and that this was picked as the best match of 03, because this is right around where we had left off with TNA, with our TNA reviews.
Yeah, we're we're close because where we are, Jeff Jarrett's still champion. So I think we're in what are we in, March, I think. So we're a couple months away, but we're around that time where AJ was starting to definitely grow as a TNA star, and then obviously eventually he would become the NWA champion, which he would wear to the ring along with his ROH tag team title trophy.
Yeah.
A tag team title belt, because he was champions with Amazing Red, which is pretty funny. So the date is June 14th, 2003, from the National Guard Armory in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Shit, I could have driven there. Son of a bitch.
Yeah,
there's a lot
Philly and Boston was pretty much there. I think New Jersey a little bit too.
Yeah, there were a lot of times I probably could have driven to a show and just didn't. It's my fault.
Yeah, I know, right?
And then they would hit your neck of the woods, because that's where we'll be for our last match. So here's the card, if you want to hear some funny names. So a couple of dark matches. Jimmy Cash pinned Lit with a one-arm slam at 128. Lit like the band?
I think he was in,
sunshine. Who was it?
That is not a group we're going to do. It's okay. It was there were these ravers. There were these ravers, and they just were entitled, and they'd take drugs and go to raves, and took their parents' money. That was the actual gimmick. Oh, and Gabe on commentary would be all up in arms, can you believe these kids and their raves?
Jeez. The next one, Lit wrestled the next match. They teamed with Lit, Slugger, and Angel Dust. Defeated Marcos, Dunn, and one of my favorite ROH and indie guys, Slick Wagner Brown.
Wow, yeah.
When Angel Dust pinned him after Slugger's body bag at 7:39. Stips stated the winner would receive a spot in the four-corner tag team match later in the night. So I watched Slick Wagner Brown at a show, it was in the 2010s, I think, in Massachusetts, because JR's good friend John Walters, former Pure champion, was wrestling on that night. And we saw him at one of the legendary Boston area Chinese restaurants, Kowloon's, which has a ton of wrestling pictures. Kind of like the Chinese Boston equivalent of Ribero's Steakhouse, except without the without the sweet satin jackets. And Slick Wagner Brown sitting there cutting promos on Twitter while eating Kung Pao chicken. It was great. While wrestling in khakis. It was awesome. It was so great. So here's the card proper. H.C. Loke and Tony DeVito defeated Buff E and Mace when DeVito pinned Buff E after a moonsault at 8:42. Matt Stryker, with a Y, not with an I, with a Y.
Eyebrow Matt Stryker, yeah.
Defeated Chance Beckett via submission with the Stryker lock in a Pure Rules match at 11:16. Homicide defeated the aforementioned John Walters, Justin Credible, and Chris Sabin by making Walters submit to an inverted Indian deathlock at 12:54. Prior to the match, Credible attacked Angel Dust to replace him in the match. Now, this is pretty good for John Walters because JR graduated. They graduated from college in 2002. So this is only a year after him and John graduated from college, and he's already in ROH. So good for him.
Yeah, that might have been Justin Credible's debut in Ring of Honor. I'm not positive, but I think it.
What about Sabin?
Sabin was only there for a little bit in 2003.
Okay. CM Punk and Colt Cabana. I think they make a great tag team now. Defeated
two wacky
Raven,
partners who hate each other.
Woohoo! Defeated Raven and BJ Whitmer in a Ravens rules match when Cabana pinned Whitmer after the Colt 45 at 16:50. It's on Punk's DVD, The Better Than You. Prince Nana pinned Diablo Santiago with an elevated DDT at 2:15. The Maximos defeated Mikey Whipwreck and Dixie when Joel pinned Dixie with the Doomsday DDT at 10:38. Then the match that we're talking about in a second, which is not the main event. The main event was The Prophecy, Christopher Daniels, Donovan Morgan, and Dan Maff. Dan Maff! I saw him wrestle in NWA a couple years ago. Defeated The Group, which was the ROH World Champion, Samoa Joe, Michael Shane, and C.W. Anderson, when Maff pinned Joe with a jackknife roll-up at 20:51. Stipulation stated the losing team would disband as a faction.
And the funny thing about that is, like, Morgan was gone almost immediately. He was pretty much gone to begin with. And the group was actually Steve Corino's group. But at that point, Steve Corino was pretty much in 01 Japan. So he wasn't even really around.
Oh, so it made sense to break them up.
Yeah, so this card, not the best. But it's almost like the 2003 Ring of Honor version of WrestleMania 13.
Yeah.
Like, one great match, one, like decent match, the part of the CM Punk Raven feud, and then a whole bunch of
correct. All right, so the first thing I have to tell you, Steve, is I had no idea. This is how limited my ROH knowledge is, which is why I'm so happy to do this pod with you and to be able to watch a ton of shit. I had no idea Paul London was in Ring of Honor. I had no idea.
He was one of the more popular. I would strongly suggest that he got discovered by WWE because of Ring of Honor, like one of the first guys, because like late 2002 he kind of wrestled, he had a feud with Michael Shane, who then went to TNA, and then they said on the match he was supposed to be the person who tagged with Styles for the tag titles, but he had to have emergency surgery, and that's why Red took his place, and so that's why there's a little bit of contention between the two that led to this match.
Right.
But he is gone. After this, he goes against Samoa Joe for the title, and that's his last match in Ring of Honor. And then he debuts with Spanky in WWE. Actually, right around this time, he's doing dark matches and like Velocity and stuff.
Right.
And then starts up right away. So yeah, kind of what like both him and Spanky, kind of their like first kind of homemade stars to leave and go to WWE.
Right.
Those dirty bastards always destroying other companies.
Yeah, jerks. Because nobody wants to get paid $30 a week.
Yes, probably at this point. Yes, probably.
Exactly.
I wouldn't doubt that it's probably around that much.
It's a badge of honor to make $30 a week rather than $250,000 a year. There's no honor in that.
And tickets for hot dogs and pizza slices and super ropes at the Frontier Fieldhouse in Chicago Ridge.
Super
they had giant super ropes all the time at the Frontier Fieldhouse. Correct?
Super ropes.
Yeah, they were huge.
That's awesome.
And I have clear memories of Kevin Steen having to like buy his dinner at the Frontier Fieldhouse, which is basically like a YMCA in Chicago, at the concession stand, like coming up from out back. Like that's how like Ring of Honor didn't have catering. Like he went and got his pizza slice and his Gatorade or whatever, paid for it out of his pocket.
That is actually pretty freaking great.
And the great thing is that they came to Chicago, like 4 or 5 times a year. And this is one of the reasons I love Owen so much. He's always been, I'm totally going off topic. I apologize. But he knew the people behind the counter at the field house, like whatever the mom, just like if you go to like a high school basketball tournament or a church thing, and it's like the same lady, and then there's a bunch of rotating high school kids helping. He would like pick up his phone and be like, yeah, here's the new baby and stuff like that. Like in the middle of, a pay-per-view, basically.
That's actually pretty great.
Yeah.
Now this match, again, very different than the first match. This one had a lot of psychology because they would do a move and then they would look at each other and then they'd shake and maybe not shake. And this one was definitely a grinder. The match time is 24-23.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended in a draw because they did the old double shoulder thing.
I hate that finish.
I hate that finish too.
It's one of my least favorite finishes.
I hate it too. It's because it makes the wrestler seem stupid. Like, I get you just wrestle for 24 minutes, but you're telling me that like AJ couldn't lift his shoulder up or something. I don't know.
Well, he couldn't. Yeah, they were like he couldn't bridge because his leg was injured. Because London was like, you don't bridge with your leg. You bridge with your neck.
Yeah, you bridge with your neck and your shoulders. You don't push up. But he had to work in the leg the whole match. AJ was pretty much a heel in TNA. Well, he's a heel at the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he kind of carried that to this match. I feel like London got some cheers.
It's kind of mixed. Yeah, like AJ was a face in Ring of Honor for sure.
Okay.
And London was a face too, but he was being kind of sarcastic with his handshakes. Like,
right.
Like how many times did they try to shake hands? Like 6 or 7?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. And
right.
My only, we brought up the finish right away. I feel like they wanted London to win because he was the one who got the title shot because this was for the number 1 contendership.
Right.
And the next show, which was Death Before Dishonor, one of their bigger shows, London got the title shot and then left. My thought is that because AJ was the NWA champion, they didn't want him. NWA didn't want TNA didn't want him to lose to London clean. I have no proof of this. I didn't do like research or anything like that, but because I was like, why are they doing a double pin here? And then when I looked and saw Paul London was the next opponent, like, oh, they probably had him scheduled already, but I don't know how closely. And I could kind of look this up while we're talking, like when exactly. AJ
it was 2 months later.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I just looked up the Joe London match was 2 months later. Death Before Dishonor was July 19th of 2003 at the Rexplex in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And according to HistoryWWE.com, this was London's last match in ROH, and then he would head off to the Flamethrower. So, because the card in June, the card was Wrestle Rave 03 in Philly at that Murphy Center that they probably wrestled in a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And then Death Before Dishonor was in July in Jersey. So.
And then when did AJ win the title?
The world title?
Yeah, in NWA.
Oh,
was it like a week before? Because there's a 3-way between AJ, Jeff Jarrett, and Raven on the Wednesday before.
Let's see. NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. So
yep, that was it. So 3 days before he won the Heavyweight Championship.
Wow.
So that was the Wednesday pay-per-view, and then they went to Ring of Honor. Wow. So I bet that's why they had to change the finish. I bet London was going to win, and then he won the title. I mean, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, Impact probably told them, you can have AJ, but he's not losing. So.
And AJ stuck around for like another year or so before I think TNA eventually pulled him because, and we don't have to get into the whole Rob Feinstein thing. It's been done to death, but they found out that Feinstein was still kind of hanging around when he was not supposed to, when they made it seem like he was completely gone. But he was still kind of hanging around. And so that was when they just pulled AJ for good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, June 11th. Yep. Yeah, I absolutely love this match until the finish. Like, were you surprised with Alexis Lurie / Mickie James in the corner?
I didn't even realize that. No, I was
not
stunned.
Expecting that at all.
No, I forgot she was sticking around. She was in AJ's corner.
Yeah. Didn't really do anything. Like, there wasn't really a point to it.
No. She was on camera a couple times, and then she got in the ring at the end of the match. But there was nothing. She didn't do anything earth-shattering or whatever. But it was cool to see her. She's a ROH original, I think. I just enjoyed the match because it was very different. It was paced a little differently. There was a lot of it was very psychology driven. It didn't have, there were strikes and they did hit the crap out of each other and there was some good chain work, but this one was paced. I mean, obviously we can't really compare it to the 3-way the year before because 3 guys and 2 guys are obviously it's a different beast. I just liked that it told a much slower story and there was a lot more kind of looking at each other and the psychology was amped up. Obviously, the ring was a lot nicer and after a year they had a little bit of cash in flow, but I just thought the match was great. Definitely check it out. Go to the ROH app if you have it, if you have Honor Club, and look under June June 14th, 2003. And if it says AJ versus Paul London, that's your match. And it was really good. Yeah. It was really good.
It had to have been so hot in there because some of the kicks and slaps, the amount of just perspiration that was flying off their body was quite impressive.
Yeah, it was. It was. Let me tell you something. Some of the buildings, Steve, that ROH has wrestled in over the years, I tell you, I'm surprised they didn't get shut down. I was at a show in the summer of 2005 in Woodbridge, Connecticut, which is about 45 minutes from here, maybe a little less than an hour. And this was during Summer of Punk and during the Matt Hardy leaving and all that stuff. And the one thing I remember that match is I regret not buying this sweet Eddie Guerrero WCW figure when he had his white and red tights. You know me, I'm addicted to that outfit. But it was like in this like place that was kind of like a rec hall for like volleyball and hoops and stuff. And there's no air conditioning. So it was, and this was the dead of August. It was brutal in there. Brutal.
Yeah, the Philly
sweat calories.
That Murphy Recreation Center, that was the first show that was pretty known for how bad it was too in there. And I don't know why you would do that to your talent.
I know, or the fans, or anybody, for that matter. So check that out.
You'd rather have it be ice cold than anything. Like doing it like
really
like a hockey facility or something.
I know, right? Crazy. So, all right. That brings us to our third and final match of the evening. And this one is obviously, as we have mentioned already, the most recognizable of the 3 for those that are casual fans. Steve, what is it?
It is the October 16th, 2004 match between CM Punk and Samoa Joe. Match 2 in their 3-match series of that year. Their first match earlier in the year went to a 60-minute draw. And so now they ran it back in Chicago at the aforementioned Frontier Fieldhouse. And someone was at this show. Oh, me. I was there.
Steve! Yay! Was it hot? Well, no, it was October.
No, that place was it was actually decent.
Yeah, the Frontier Fieldhouse. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it was kind of like a YMCA type thing. My quick story about this, and I thought this was the one where it happened. My wife went with a friend to like this convention thing in Chicago on the same day that this happened. So I didn't have anyone to go with. So I asked another mutual friend who worked with my wife, who was not a wrestling fan, kind of he was an engineer type dude, but also on the side played in a punk rock band, which you never would have guessed by how straight and narrow he looked. So he had never seen a wrestling show, knew of wrestling, and basically sat third or fourth row. And I sent you a picture earlier on. I saw on we watched this one on YouTube because it's not up on Honor Club for some reason.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I'd like to know more about why there's not much of 2004 on there. There's got to be a reason.
Yeah, maybe there's some money involved.
With who owns it or something, because it wasn't even before Tony Khan had it. But yeah, he popped up on there, so it was so great. He saw this all-time, famous match, one of the best matches in Ring of Honor history, and he literally had no idea what he was saying. But he really enjoyed it. There's the part that I saw was like when Joe basically did a tope on a Punk and murdered him. And you can see him going crazy on there. But yeah, this is just, like you said, a completely different style of match where it was just kind of a classic wrestling match. Like you could see someone like Flair doing this. Obviously not with a couple of dives. That's not really typical Flair, but it wasn't like they did a lot of high flying stuff. They were pretty much like two topes, and that was about it. They were fighting on the floor. I remember this from when I saw it too. I knew it was going to happen. Like Punk for about 5 minutes just worked like a headlock takeover, but actually made it seem like it was a legitimate move instead of, like on some, random episode of Raw where a guy just grabs a headlock and just lays there for 30 seconds. Like working it and it could be a really good move. Some of those kind of quote unquote rest holds, if you do it with some gravitas, like an arm drag is an arm drag unless Ricky Steamboat does an arm drag because he puts a lot into it and he makes it look like it's a devastating move. And it was the same with this. Like some of the stuff they did in the first half hour of the match was really basic, but it looked like it actually hurt.
Yeah, it did. Everything in this match looked like it hurt.
Yeah.
So I'm looking. What was the date of the first? Because I'm trying to look at. I'm on History WWE, and I'm trying to find when the first match was.
I can find that real quick here.
I'm looking at every card, and I don't see when they.
I know that they had. So they had a couple of matches before. They had a match in August of 2003 and November of 2003, but that was not part of this series. June the 12th was the first one, and that was part of Ring of Honor World Title Classic was the name of the card. Meltzer gave that 4.25 stars. Cage Match gave it 9.24, which is anything above 8 is a really good match. Anything above 9 is like spectacular. And then they did have a 3-way match with Homicide a couple months later, but then this was the second match. And then they had the final match at All-Star Extravaganza 2 in December.
December 4th.
Yeah, another 4.25 from Meltzer, 9.46. So only slightly behind this match that we looked at, which is 9.56. And it was cool. Have you seen that one?
I have not seen that one, the third one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did. I have it on the... Yes, I have. It's been a while. I was trying to watch it today at work, and the fucking DVD, typical ROH, the DVD wouldn't play on my computer, so I'll have to watch it. I'll have to watch the third one again for a while. Incidentally, I got to check and see if this match is on, not to change the subject, but I have to see if this match is on the ROH app. A few months, 14 days before, at the Midnight Express reunion in Philly, Joe and Danielson wrestled for $39.12 And Joe won with the Coquina clutch. I have a weird feeling that match is probably pretty fucking great.
So. Yeah, that's actually the show I'm listening to right now, the ROH recap. It's usually when I listen to at night because they're pretty long and they're pretty calm. And that's a compliment. I fall asleep to them. When I have something I fall asleep to, that's a compliment because it's nice and relaxing and puts me at ease.
Yes.
I used to joke with Chad because I would fall asleep to him in Parv back in the day. He's like, "Oh man, it put me right out." I'd like listen to the same podcast like 7 times to get through it. He was so insulted. I'm like, no, Chad, that means it's nice and relaxing, and I enjoy it.
That's funny. Well, you can't fall asleep to Between the Sheets. It'd take you a year to break your insomnia.
God, you can fall asleep and wake up, and it'd still be on.
It'd still be on a year later. Yeah, that's in. That one was the one I'm talking about is October 2nd in Philly at the Midnight Express reunion. Interesting. All right, so here's the rest of the card that you saw, Steve, on that October 16th evening at the Frontier Fieldhouse. Davey Andrews fought T.J. Dalton to a no contest when Tony DeVito and H.C. Loke attacked both men. Jay Lethal pinned Delirious with a full Nelson suplex at 8:19.
I think these are pre-show matches too.
Okay. Tracy Brooks, I love Tracy Brooks, pins Daisy Hayes.
Yep.
Daisy Hayes after a stunner and a clothesline at 3:43.
So that match, Tracy Brooks did, what's the move that Razor Ramon does and Heyman Page and Bradshaw? You hold them up and you toss them over your head. I can't think of the name of it.
Oh, it's like almost like a flapjack slam kind of thing. I know what you're talking about.
You hold them in front of you and you chuck them over your head. She did that to Daisy Hayes.
Oh, you mean they're like the Razor's Edge kind of thing?
No, I can't think of it. You're basically holding them up in the front of your chest, and then you fall backwards and throw the guy over your head.
Oh, like a back suplex. Almost like a back
kind of like that.
Like a rear back suplex, yep.
And so, Tracy Brooks did that to Daisy Hayes on the floor, and we were kind of sitting in the first row for the pre-show before everyone got there. And so she landed directly on my friend's lap. Again, never seen a wrestling show in his life. And then he has this like Daisy Hayes is very, very pretty, but very tiny, like 100 pounds, 110 pounds. So he's just like sitting here like, what? And again, this is the pre-show. Like, what is this? This is great.
Yeah, no, that's pretty funny. Let's see.
And Tracy Brooks, she hasn't wrestled in a long time, has she? Has she been retired
since? Yeah. I mean, she's Frankie's wife, right?
Yeah, they've been married a very long time.
Very long time, yeah. Let's see. Josh Daniels defeated Matt Seidel, Trent Acid, and Angel Dust by pinning Angel Dust with a bridging German at 6:33. Mm-hmm. Nigel McGuinness and Chad Collier with Ricky Steamboat defeated B.J. Whitmer and Dan Maff with Mick Foley in a hardcore match when McGuinness pinned Whitmer at 11:39 with a roll-up. Whitmer and Maff originally won via DQ at 4:45 when Tony DeVito and H.C. Loke attacked them, but Foley restarted the match as a hardcore match. Okay, that was it. So
yeah, this was weird. This was a really brief feud that I didn't quite understand. It was like Ricky Steamboat was like the fan, like he was the pure wrestling guy. And Mick Foley was the hardcore, and Mick Foley wanted Ring of Honor to be known as Ring of Hardcore. And like Steamboat was trying to be heelish, but he can't really be heelish.
No, not at all. Nah,
and
not
Whitmer's not really likable. And but for me, this was cool because this was the first time I had ever heard of or seen Nigel. And instantly the guy was like stood out. He's bigger. He's got the spiked hair. He came to the ring to like the Sex Pistols. Yeah, it just completely. He had like an iron for some reason in his hand, like in his first year to come out, and so he'd use it as a weapon. But yeah, it was a very bizarre feud.
Right.
That was basically between Steamboat and Mick Foley, two of the most likable people in wrestling history.
That's funny. Yeah, true. Tony DeVito and H.C. Loke defeated T.J. Dalton and Davey Andrews after a spike pile driver. Jack Evans and Roddy Strong, the first time we've heard that name, defeated Homicide and Rocky Romero when Evans pinned Romero with a 6:30 splash. Alex Shelley defeated Jimmy Jacobs in an I Quit match.
Great match.
And then this match.
Yeah. Jacobs and Alex Shelley basically toured around the country because they were both from the same area in Detroit.
Right.
And so had this feud anywhere they went. And then, this was kind of the blow off of the match. And, Jimmy Jacobs had the big spike at that time and was basically doing the Bruiser Brody gimmick, except for the fact that he was like 5'6".
Yeah.
Which was what made it so funny.
Right. I have to check that. I want to check that match out. This is another thing that we're talking about. We're having our spotlight matches, but then I'm seeing these other matches pop in my eye.
Right.
That I have to go back to.
There's so much great history. Like when we recap TNA, there's great matches hidden in there, but it's like a lot of crap. That's
a lot of crap. A lot of offensive junk and Bruce and Rainbow Express and
Disco Inferno and
sweaty Russo being pervy and just strippers in the cage. Oh God. So this match is just a flat out war of attrition. Like you said, both these guys know each other very well. They had a great match in June. I consider this almost like the trilogy between Flair and Steamboat. Because if you remember, the second match of their trilogy, which I consider the greatest WCW match of all time, is the 2 out of 3 57-minute match at the Superdome at Clash 6, which, I mean, it is, in my opinion, the greatest WCW match of all time. This trilogy is almost the same, except there was no title changes. Joe held the belt for all three of them. But this was the middle one that went the long. Well, you had draw, and then you had the other match. But I feel like this one, like the 2 out of 3 Flair Steamboat, was a war of attrition. It was just survival for Joe. And Punk's just leaning into it. And Punk knows he has like a 40-pound disadvantage. And Punk was just throwing the kitchen sink at him and just working him over and trying to do everything he can and hitting all sorts of moves and grinding him in those like long headlocks, but he's got his elbow in his collarbone. And I mean, it's just crazy. And it was a much quicker hour than you think. Let's put it this way. I think any hour match feels faster than Brett and Shawn at WrestleMania 12.
Yes.
But it did not feel, I swear to God, it did not feel like an hour. It was really fun to watch. The crowd, obviously hot, Punk's backyard. And Joe was just a good champion in the sense that he knew that when Joe was champion, and we've seen this when he was TNA champion and even at WWE at times, Joe knew the psychology of how to wrestle as a champion, meaning he knew that he was the one in control. He had all the cards because for him to lose his title, Punk had to pin him. Joe just had to survive. And he did it at the first match in June. And just like here, the same thing, just survive. And the storytelling, in my opinion, was just so good. How Punk was wrestling as you could feel the clock ticking. Punk is wrestling with so much more immediacy, whereas Joe was just kind of surviving, getting through the pinfalls, getting through the pin attempts, surviving the big moves, the Anaconda Vice, the top rope hits. It was just a fun story between two guys who had to wrestle very different matches. It was really good. It was really good.
Yeah. And what's difficult when you have a champion who is booked as a monster, think even Roman Reigns right now, who's been undefeated for a couple of years, it's really hard to make it seem like someone's going to knock him off. But with Punk, I feel that they did that by doing these two draws. And you can't do it with everyone. You can't have like every, contender bring him to a draw because Joe was champion for a very, very long time. But like you had to make people believe that there was a chance. And I can't remember if I knew, because remember, like there were, quite a couple months between getting the DVDs out and VHS tapes out. And it's not like, you're going to buy every single one. If they're running $20 a pop, if I bought like 20 DVDs a year, my wife would probably kill me. And,
right. Yeah, that's true.
yeah, like I don't remember how many events they had at this point, but it was, probably a couple a month. So I don't remember if I knew that their first match was a draw or not, but I'm sure most of the people did know that. So you think historically, if there's a draw, then the next match has a finish. And in this case, there's another draw. So it was pretty creative booking, I thought. And, people did think Punk was going to win. They don't have the um, theme songs and the walkouts for most of these shows on Honor Club, just like in the network because of the music aspect. But I do remember people, shouting "New Champ," for when Punk comes out. But yeah, it was great. And then their third match just as good. And yeah, at that point you probably figured, he's, someone's got to win, for that one. But yeah, just great match. Yep. Like the only complaint I had about this was during a time where Ring of Honor had horrible production.
Right.
The lighting on this one, and I don't know anything about TV production, but I do know that like the people doing the camera work, at the ring were like students. So, and not film students, they were wrestling students. Right. And to do the white balance for the camera, for the hard cam, which is on like a scaffold, Todd Sinclair would literally get in a ring with like a white gym towel. Not like a towel you would take to the pool, like when you would get at the gym and put on your treadmill to like dab your head, and he'd hold it up in the air.
Yep.
Hold it up in the air to like do the and I thought, oh, this must be how they do it. And now I don't know, like no, that's like ridiculous. So the whole time of this match, like poor Todd Sinclair looks like he has a white orb for a head. and then the lighting on the hard cam was so off. So it's just, and I get it. It's 2004. It's independent. But yeah, it took a couple years before they had better production. And to be honest, it took a really long time to have high quality production, probably until at least HDNet came along.
Yes. And that was what, 2009?
Yeah. 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, and of course their pay-per-view, like their streaming stuff were always terrible.
Right. And it wasn't, look, and they weren't that late to the party because WWE's first pay-per-view in HD was the 2008 Rumble. Yeah. So they weren't that late to the party. Obviously HD isn't cheap. Mm-hmm. So, I don't remember when TNA went HD. Probably.
Yeah, but even, and granted, TNA had a lot more money. But even with the TNA shows we watch, at least like the production looks good.
Right.
Like it's watchable. Some of the shows were just not watchable.
Yeah, I agree. They were very rough. This match is not rough. So Check it out. It's on the ROH. I don't know if it's on the ROH app. It's definitely on YouTube.
Definitely you can find it on YouTube for sure. It's not on the app at all.
No, it's not on the app. October 16th, 2004. I got to look for that. That Joe Daniels, Bryan Danielson match from October 2nd. 39-12, the Coquina Clutch. That match has to be crazy.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's our inaugural jaunt here on the Pod of Honor, and we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you watched the three matches that we introduced to you tonight. It's the just to recap, it is Bryan Danielson, Low Key, and Christopher Daniels from the very first show in February of 2002. AJ Styles versus Paul London from June of 2003. And, of course, Punk Joe 2 from October of 2004. We are going to be doing this monthly for the moment. It may go to bi-monthly. We'll see how it goes. But it will always drop on the first Tuesday of the month. So, of course, this month it dropped on February 7th. Next month it will drop on, I would say, March 7th, because February and March always are identical. So just check us out here. on the PTB Wrestling Network and all of your podcast catchers, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher. You guys have been wonderful. The podcast, the download numbers have been amazing around the country and around the world, really. Top 100 consistently in Britain, Canada, Australia, and in the U.S. And we thank you for that. That's all you. That's not us. We just babble. You're the ones that want to listen, and that means the world to us. And it means the world to Steve, because then
it really does.
Then he could get super rope. We will probably have guests from time to time. I know our good friend JD Jordan Duncan would like to be on with us. Maybe we'll get Chad on for a show, Chad Campbell. We definitely would like to get Kevin Kelly on. Maybe we'll try and get him on for our March episode when we talk about the legacy of the Briscoes. I think that would be a nice touch. But that's our topic for March. We're definitely going to discuss the legacy of Mark and Jay Briscoe, both as a tag team and singles, because of course Jay is, our God rest his soul, is a former world champion. And maybe we could talk a little bit, Steve, because you'll probably have background on what kind of precipitated Jay getting the solo push. Because I never really caught it. When did they decide Jay Briscoe was a main event guy on his own? I never really just out of the blue he was feuding. It was really weird.
I think Mark might have been injured at the time, and then they went with it. I always wonder why Mark didn't get a single run, a singles run in ROH. I can see Jay looks a little bit more the part. He's bigger, stronger, has the build a little bit more, but
not as crazy looking.
Yeah, but
has most teeth.
Yeah, he was. I mean, Mark is just a personality, more so than Jay. Mark is hilarious. He's funny. His promos are fantastic. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah, it'd be cool to reach out to Kevin and see if he wants to come on.
But we're going to do a bevy of topics and go back to some great matches. And I think now with the Watch ROH app, kind of easier to manipulate, and a set price and that kind of thing, I think it'll be a lot easier for everybody. So thank you, Tony Khan. People think I treat him like crap, but I don't. Well, most of the time I don't. He did a good thing here. Finally, buying ROH and kind of dawdling around with it, he finally did something with it and gave us the archive. But I am perplexed at at the reason why probably a lot of that 02 stuff, Steve, is probably unwatchable.
There's probably a lot of it. I wonder, it's who owns the DVDs, if it's still RF Video. And that 04 period was really murky with ownership, because that's when Feinstein got taken out, and then it was partially owned by someone until Kerry Silken bought it straight out.
Right.
So I'm sure that's what it is. If anything, I have faith in in terms of business stuff, I have faith that Tony Khan will figure that out and get that stuff on. I'm happy about it. It runs so much better than it did before.
So it was in March on a backside. Sorry to interrupt, but we were talking about this earlier. So it was March when Feinstein was caught in the sting.
Yeah.
TNA ended the deal. They withdrew AJ Styles and Daniels. Punk gave up his TNA agreement. Mm-hmm. And then in June, he resigned.
Yeah. And then there's all of 02 is on. I'm just going off the top of my head from what I remember from watching the other day. Half of 03 and very little of 04. And then pretty much most of everything beyond that. And that is new, because I think that's new from the original Honor Club, because they took a few months off because it was just notoriously poorly run. And then pretty much every single event from 2008, 2009, somewhere around there is on there, which there were a lot of holes earlier on. All the Sinclair stuff was on, but that HDNet era, the TV shows, that's another thing that's not on. But to be honest, most of those HDNet TV shows weren't that great. It was more trying to get you to the events. They had some good stuff, but it wasn't the best. They had some really weird angles too.
Right. So anyway, Steve, this has been a lot of fun.
It's been great.
And we're going to keep doing this. So thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you in 1 month. with our next episode, we shake your hand virtually here on the Pod of Honor.